You and I we both were speakers at the Venezuelan embassy
We
when
sure
they
were.
were in Washington, D.C. They were just beginning. They don't like to call it an occupation, a holding of space in the Venezuelan embassy when the first Trump administration was going to steal the embassy.
Mhm.
And before it was locked down, they had a bunch of speakers. And you spoke about how the CIA decides and comes up with plans for coupping other countries. So I thought that your initial thoughts on Venezuela might dovetail well with that.
Oh my God, I have so much to say. I don't even know where to begin. First of all, I still have the Venezuelan government shit in my house.
Yeah.
Remember, when we finished speaking, we all took stuff with us for safekeeping.
Yeah,
to give back to the Venezuelans when they got their embassy back. I still have their stuff.
Yeah, because they wanted those who were we had been activists and others had been invited to hold that space, so they wanted people to protect.
Yeah, they asked us to take it.
Yeah.
So the one thing that sticks in my mind from that night more than anything was when I walked out of the embassy. You remember there were several, half a dozen or so of us who stayed in the embassy. I went home. You went home.
I didn't stay either. Yeah.
But there were several who stayed in until they were finally arrested and thrown out. But when I left the embassy that night, there was a large crowd in front of it, and there were several uniformed Secret Service agents that were in the crowd. And as I was passing two of them, one of them said to the other, "So who are the good guys and who are the bad guys?" And then the other one said, "The ones out here are with us. The ones in the building are with Putin."
Right.
And I stopped and I said, "Oh, you can't be serious." And then I thought, no, you know what? It's not even worth the conversation. And I just walked the rest of the way home.
Yeah, the ones in the building were also with international law.
Yeah, exactly. So getting to your point, there are several things that strike me on an immediate basis. This was very much a CIA coup, very much. We knew, thanks to reporting in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, that as long ago as August, the CIA was actively trying to recruit somebody inside Maduro's inner circle. We know that because his personal pilot came out and said, "Hey, the CIA tried to recruit me. They offered me $50 million. And what they wanted was whenever President Maduro got on the plane, like maybe to run to Cuba or somewhere else, to instead land the plane in Key West so the FBI could grab him and they wouldn't have to, invade and snatch him out of his bed and take him to New York."
Right.
That this guy would just deliver him. And he refused, and he went public with the information. Number one. Number two, the New York Times reported over the weekend that the CIA had a source in Maduro's inner circle who apparently took the $50 million.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they knew that Maduro was asleep in his bed.
Yeah, because he'd been changing sleeping locations, so they had to have someone inside. Yeah,
they had somebody inside. I would go further and say that the CIA most likely also recruited multiple senior military officials because there was no resistance, none. We barely bombed the country. What we bombed, it resulted, I'm not making light of it. It was 80 people dead so far, including at least 35 Cubans. So this is terrible, terrible thing. But it wasn't a full-scale invasion where we had 100,000 troops and we killed 5,000 people in the first night. That wasn't it at all.
It wasn't even Panama, which killed 1,000 people.
Wasn't even Panama. And I've talked about Panama a couple of times today to make that distinction. But you can't just send a group of guys into a country in the middle of the night in a helicopter, grab the president and the first lady out of their beds without the military being in on it. And so my guess is that these bombings we saw of centrally located Venezuelan military bases, those bombings were probably more for show than anything else. The administration, I'm sure, is very happy to kill Cubans, by the way. Did you know that we we bombed Hugo Chavez's tomb and destroyed it?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was just mean. That was just done just to put it in their faces.
That's crazy.
But the whole operation, the fact that there were no U.S. casualties, in and out, mission accomplished, grab the guy and the first lady, that tells me that there were a whole bunch of people on the CIA payroll, including senior military officials.
So does that give you, there's a lot of discussion now as to who is or will be in charge of Venezuela. Trump has, I might play the clip in a bit, but Trump has publicly said we're in charge. Then that was kind of walked back a little bit, or the U.S. is in charge. The vice president has now taken the oath of office, Delcy Rodriguez, but she has said that Maduro is still the president. Does this make you, considering you think there were a lot more in on it, does this make you think the military is not going to side with the vice president? Or?
I'm wondering if the vice president's in on it, because 48 hours ago, she was ready to lay down her life. And today she said, well, let's have a dialogue. We can come to some kind of agreement. It's like, where'd that come from? Agreement? We just kidnapped your president. And you want to have a dialogue? No. Number one. Number two, there will not be a U.S. invasion and or occupation of Venezuela, simply because Venezuela is the size of Germany, France, and Austria combined, and most of it is jungle. It's not possible to occupy Venezuela.
So, yeah, what I perhaps fear most is that a lot of the ruling elite in the United States or the Trump administration might be fine with, some of these horrific scenarios like Libya, where it's like, yeah, the people are in a horror show. I mean, open air slave markets and warlords, but the oil rights are fine.
Yeah, and that's why I think this is far bigger than just Maduro or just, the Monroe Doctrine or whatever. This is about China and Iran, in my view. And let me explain. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves on the planet. 300 billion barrels of oil. It'll take centuries to lift it all. The problem is it's the dirtiest oil in the world. It's the highest sulfur content of anybody's proven reserves. And so you have to have very specialized refineries in order to clean that oil. And even with the injection of heavy chemicals, it's generally not oil that you would turn into gasoline. It's mostly for home heating requirements, right? So until 2017, where were the only refineries on earth that could clean Venezuelan oil? They were in Houston, Texas. Mm-hmm. And in 2017, the first Trump administration effectively shut down the Venezuelan oil industry, and we mothballed those refineries. But the world didn't just screech to a halt. China and India immediately built their own refineries to handle Venezuela's dirty oil. But the Chinese did it right. The Chinese built a refinery in China, but they also built one in the Caribbean. The Indians built one in India, and they've been shipping Venezuelan oil to India to refine it there. The Chinese were ready to do it right there in the Caribbean. The refinery is built, but it hasn't yet been opened. Well, now they don't need a refinery because whatever oil Venezuela lifts is going to come to the United States. We don't have to occupy the oil fields in order to control Venezuela's oil or to control the economy. We just have to insist with a very stern look and a pointing finger that oil comes to the United States. So why did I bring up Iran in this? First of all, this was a big fuck you to the Chinese. But secondly, virtually the only leverage that Iran has in international affairs today is the ability to close off the Strait of Hormuz, right? Something like 60% of the world's oil flows out of the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz. It's only about 16 miles across, and it's It's that's not true. The Bab el-Mandeb is. It's even closer than that. It's more like 4 miles across. So it's easy to block the Strait of Hormuz. So in the event of, something terrible happening, if the Iranians needed to do something to pressure Western economies, and especially the US economy, closing the Strait of Hormuz, presumably with Russian and or Chinese consent, would be the only thing that they have to do. Well, now we don't need Iranian oil. We have all the Venezuelan oil we could use for the next 500 years. Mm-hmm. So it further weakens Iran. How much does it weaken Iran? I'm not sure yet. Does it weaken Iran to the point where the Israelis are going to feel free to go back in and attack Iran again? That's what I'm afraid of. Benjamin Netanyahu was just at Mar-a-Lago over the holiday. What was that conversation about? We don't know. I would venture to say it was about Venezuela and Iran. So that's what I'm worried about today.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, I mean, for anyone who still buys any of the administration excuses about this being about drugs or anything else, is just laughable. I mean, how gullible can you be? This is absolutely about oil and resources. And of course, Trump has even said that at times, talking about we're going to get our oil back and things like that. Does this worry you at all that the U.S. there seems to be no international law that matters anymore to the United States? Or am I kind of being naive in thinking there ever was? I mean, there were obviously endless a number of assassinations and other things going on decades ago. So is this anything new?
No, not really. To tell you the truth, it started in 1985. With the assassination, with the execution of a DEA agent in Mexico named Kiki Camarena. Kiki Camarena was a highly regarded DEA agent. He was stationed in Guadalajara. He was working against something that at the time was called the Guadalajara cartel. And he was outed as a DEA officer. And so he was kidnapped. He was held for 30 days, tortured mercilessly. And then they drove a piece of rebar through the top of his head. That's how they killed him. And then dumped his body in a plastic bag on the side of the road. Ronald Reagan demanded, in the aftermath of the Kiki Camarena execution, that Congress pass a law authorizing the United States to cross borders with force to bring people to justice who have violated U.S. law. It had never been done before. And so Congress passed that law in 1985. We sent special forces across the border into Mexico, and we kidnapped the cartel members who had tortured and executed Kiki Camarena, including the doctor who treated him so that he remained alive to be tortured more. The doctor actually won at trial. He was found not guilty. Everybody else was convicted at trial and sentenced to life without parole. So that law has been on the books since 1985. I'm old enough to remember that when we invaded Panama in 1989 to snatch President Manuel Noriega, we used the Kiki Camarena law to justify it. And so when the Soviets said something at the UN Security Council, we said, you can't say anything. This is legal by U.S. law. In fact, during the Camarena case, or after the Camarena case, the Mexicans who were convicted appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the law was, in fact, had been legally passed. And so we can cross borders. That's the same law that the Trump administration this weekend relied on, saying, look, he was indicted in New York for crimes against Americans, so it was perfectly legal for us to send in this team of, executioners or whatever they were to kill 80 people who had nothing to do with anything, bomb Hugo Chavez's grave, and bring Maduro back to the United States.
It's strikingly repulsive. I can't help but think it also shows the desperation of the U.S. empire, the fact that we are resorting to these tactics because the writing on the wall economically is that China's on the rise and the U.S. is fading and waning, and so it seems to me it reeks of desperation. You're running into other countries and simply black bagging their leaders because you're nervous about where this global, economics is going.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. In great part, that's what this was about. We've been hearing for the last 2 years, for example, that the BRICS countries are talking about, and it would probably take 20 years, but talking about a unified currency. We don't want any unified currency. We want all oil sales to be in dollars, like they always have been.
Thank you.
A unified currency would crash the economy because it would make U.S. Treasury bills unattractive to foreign investors like the government of China.
Thank you for saying that, because I've been so frustrated that I am yelling at the top of my lungs about the petrodollar and even independent media. It seems so many of them either don't know or don't care that our dollar is basically, unlike most countries, we can print as much as we want as long as it's the how fossil fuels are sold and it remains the reserve currency. But it only remains the reserve currency as long as the petrodollar is strong.
That's right.
So, yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and Trump took a real risk here, but the risk has passed. The risk was, say, within the first 24 or 48 hours after we snatched him, what would the Chinese and Russian reactions be? Would the Chinese send their aircraft carrier? They have one aircraft carrier. Would they divert it to make the ocean crossing and come to the Caribbean, at least as a show of support for their friends and allies in Venezuela? No. They just said, geez, that's unfortunate. That, the Americans probably shouldn't have done that. And that was it. Did the Russians attack Volodymyr Zelensky?
John has frozen for me.
Oh, shit.
Let me know, folks, if that's what you're seeing as well. Oh, wait.
Nope.
Okay. You're back for me.
Oh, it never froze for me. I wonder what that was all about.
You
never froze even.
I wonder if it was me freezing, but it looked to me like you were freezing. Anyway.
I don't know. So the Chinese reaction has been nil. And the Russian reaction, the Russians just said, we disagree with that. And then that's it. So if there was going to be any serious superpower pushback, the time for that is come and gone.
Do you, speaking of that, I was wondering, do you feel the bombing of the fishermen, besides creating this kind of ridiculous, we're fighting drugs dynamic or propaganda, do you think that also was basically a test balloon to see, like, can we just blatantly bomb fishermen and there'll be no response from Russia or China?
Or Congress? Yes, I think that's exactly what it was. Because this was clearly a war crime, right? There's no debate. This was a war crime and nobody cared. And so if Americans don't care and the Russians and the Chinese are not running to the UN Security Council or better yet to the General Assembly where they would actually win a vote, then just do whatever you want. Nobody's going to stop you.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Well, when to shift topics for a second, when I first wanted to book you, it actually was not about Venezuela, but
no.
You're great for this topic. But I wanted to ask you, you were featured heavily on Tucker Carlson's many-part docu-series on 9/11, and I'm sure it was seen by countless millions of people. And I was just wondering if you could, in these last 10 minutes, but you don't have to fill the 10 minutes, but to give kind of some of the things that you discussed in that series about what kind of Americans still don't seem to know about 9/11.
Oh, there's a lot that we don't know. And, Tucker's the first person to really mainstream it. Until this documentary series came out, it was mostly people sort of on the edges of the issue, on the fringes of the conversation, who were talking about. And listen, I'm guilty of mocking these people. I admit it. I've mocked them for years, because I can't even tell you how many people have told me the space aliens did it. Seriously, the lizard people did it. The Saudi royal family did it. The Jews did it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was 100 different people did it. It's like, no, Al-Qaeda did it. Now, we can get into the details of Al-Qaeda doing it. Like, for example, could the Israelis have stopped it? I've always been of the belief that, yes, the Israelis could have stopped it and elected not to. Why? Because they knew that if we were hit in the United States, if thousands of Americans were killed, we would go out there and kill as many Muslims as we possibly could. And that's what we did. We killed 2 million people over the next 20 years. When we talk about the 9/11 Commission, like, do Americans know that the 9/11 Commission was not permitted to speak with any active duty CIA officers? Do Americans know that the 9/11 Commission was not permitted to interview a single Guantanamo detainee? So no Al-Qaeda fighters or leaders were ever interviewed.
And we know that at minimum, both the FBI and CIA had connection, had informants.
Yeah.
Within these hijackers.
Yeah, the problem there was, and I'm an evangelist on this issue. The problem there was the CIA knew that the hijackers were in San Diego, but didn't want to tell the FBI because the FBI has primacy in the United States, the CIA has primacy overseas, and the CIA wanted to try to recruit them as reporting agents inside Al-Qaeda. If the CIA had told the FBI they were on U.S. soil, the FBI would have gotten the recruitment. Number one. So it was a bureaucratic pissing match. On the other hand, the FBI knew that 9/11 was being planned, but didn't want to tell the CIA because the FBI wanted to make the recruitments. They were looking overseas for the hijackers, like, we can't find them. We're looking all over overseas because they were here. Did you know that until 2009, the CIA and FBI computer systems were not compatible? That's another part of the fallout from 9/11. So when I was overseas, even post 9/11, if I had a sensitive walk-in, or I met with a recruited source, or I had actionable intelligence, I would sit at my computer, I would send it to the operational division at the CIA, the counterterrorism center at the CIA, 6 different units at the CIA needed to see it. But I would also send the cable to the State Department, to the Pentagon, to the White House, the NSC, this guy, that guy, the other guy. I literally couldn't send it to the FBI because the FBI's computer system was incompatible. And they did that on purpose because the CIA doesn't want the FBI to know its business, and vice versa.
And a lot of the cover-up, like the 28 redacted pages and stuff, had to do with Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, specifically the Saudi government. You know, when we captured Abu Zubaydah, we also confiscated his diary. I use the word diary loosely. It was more than a diary. I mean, some of it was a diary. Some of it was a doodle book, or he would write poetry, or he would write these one-act plays. He was quite an accomplished artist. Very, very good sketcher, seriously.
Okay.
And I'm leafing through this thing while he was still unconscious. And he's got the cell phone numbers of 3 Saudi princes. So I sent a cable to headquarters. I said, be advised, we confiscated this doodle book. That's what I called it. I called it a doodle book. The FBI called it a diary, and that's what it became known as. But it's got these 3 cell phone numbers, and they all belong to Saudi princes. One was a minor prince from an offshoot of the royal family called the Saud al-Kabir branch. Anyway, we went to the Saudis and we said, look, we're going to start killing people, and some of them are going to be named Al Saud if you don't clean up your act. Next thing you know, we told the Saudis in that same conversation, we want these 3 princes. The next thing you know, one of them undergoes bariatric surgery and dies on the operating table. One is killed in a one-car crash on the Riyadh to Jeddah highway. And one of them goes camping in the desert and dies of thirst. And they said, we were going to turn them over to you guys, but they died. So it's just not possible.
Jesus. In this last couple of minutes, another topic shift. Since you were forced into prison for revealing and actually, I think the first time I ever met you was your
my going away party.
My going away party to prison, thrown by Code Pink, I think.
Yeah, it was.
You've spoken out for prison reform, and I wonder if you could snap your fingers and change things about our horrific prison system, what would be some of the things at the top of your list?
If you can't just replace the entire leadership of the Bureau of Prisons with, somebody from Denmark or Norway, which is not likely to happen. The two things that you have to focus on immediately are medical care and food. One of the very first things that I saw when I went to prison, on my very first full day, I reported on a Thursday. On Friday was fish day. And one of the Italians across the hall from me said, Friday, it's fish day. And I said, oh, good. I like fish. And he says, oh, buddy, no, you're not going to want to eat this fish. We call it sewer trout. And I said, oh, okay, I'll skip it. So I went down to the cafeteria and they had these boxes stacked up behind the chow line. And the boxes say, I wrote about this at the time contemporaneously. The boxes say, Alaskan cod, product of China, feed use only, not for human consumption. And they're slopping it onto trays. And that was some of the better food that we had. So yeah, that, and then there, for all intents and purposes, there is no medical care. If you've got a medical problem in prison, you're going to die. That's it. I cracked a crown. And so I went to the dentist, the prison dentist, and he said, listen, buddy, he says, I'm going to do you a favor because I know you. He knew my case and I wasn't in there, but for 23 months. He said, I'm going to put you a temporary crown. It should last until you go home and you can get a dentist to fix it for you. He said, my only job here is no matter what reason people come to the dentist for, I just pull the tooth. That's it. That's the dental care. Medical care is, good luck. Here's some Tylenol. We wish you the best. So food and medical have to change immediately.
Yeah, it's a horror show, and it's because the prisoners have no political power. No one cares about them. No one in Congress cares to speak up for them. And people seem to forget we are the largest prison state in the world. Yeah.
In fact, everybody probably knows this statistic by now. We have 5% of the world's population. We have 25% of the world's prison population. It's unacceptable.